Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, Jeff Waldorf. I'm way the hell over here, I don't know why. So I'm going to have to adjust my camera a little bit. There we go. Hey, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, Jeff Waldorf. Got a great show for you guys today. Including Taylor Swift. I know you're all super excited about that story. We'll talk about that. We'll have a little bit of fun, of course, especially with conservatives. Then we have how the American people feel about Brett Kavanaugh being placed on the Supreme Court. We also have a story about banks and who they are funding in this upcoming midterm election. Then college students, the drastic measures they're taking to just be able to afford books. Insanity. Then, of course, we have more stories, global warming, climate change. We have a black man arrested for moving a TV into his own home. That's amazing. / super sad. And, of course, good news, Bernie Sanders as well. So we got a lot of stories today that we want to cover. So we're going to get to it here in a minute. But before I do, please like and share the stream. We're now dual streaming Facebook and YouTube. So we're doing the Facebook, we're doing the YouTubes, we're doing all that stuff. Like, we ain't on Twitch yet. I don't know if I have enough streams. I don't want to have too many because, what happens if you start crossing the streams? Never cross the streams. Never cross the streams. So, fun. As I said before, we're going to have an interesting show. All right. So, that said, let's see. I just got to see if that stream is actually working on Facebook. It appears to be. All right, good. Don't need any insanity in the control room here. Okay. Anyway, I know it's super weird. Before we get into it, one more thing. There is I'm doing like a subscriber drive, but I'm also trying to do some a patron drive as well. Patreon.com/TYTNation. So we've been hit kind of hard lately by more YouTube changes, and we are still under 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, so I want to boost that up. And I also need your guys' help on Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, and to thank all the patrons who already do support us. Your help is invaluable, and believe me, you saved the show, but now I need help even more. So to try to transition away from getting most of my revenue from YouTube. So thank you to all those who've already helped, and thank you to those who will sign up to keep the show on the air. And that's basically what we're doing. All right. We are at 87,700 subscribers. So close. So close to 90,000. So close. So let's get there, guys. Okay? Share with everybody you know. Urge them to subscribe to the channel. All right. That's enough of that. Let's do some stories. Let's start out with Taylor Swift. All right. The day that many people have been waiting for, apparently, has happened. Taylor Swift has jumped into politics. She has broken her long, non-political silence. Now, what side did she come out on? Well, let's get into that. Now, on Instagram, earlier on Sunday, the singer came out and endorsed two Democratic politicians while coming out publicly against another Tennessee Republican. Now, that Republican is Marsha Blackburn. Now, look, Marsha Blackburn is, by all traits, a horrendous person. And so she's been involved in a lot of terrible decisions. So look, any good person would be against Marsha Blackburn. And so, Taylor Swift, congratulations. You are now a decent person. Wonderful. Anyway, at least when it comes to this. Now, she actually wrote on her Instagram. I'm going to read you some of that post here. She said, for Blackburn, her voting record on Congress appalls and terrifies me. Ooh. So, yeah, that shows you what she believes. Swift continues. She said she voted against equal pay for women. She voted against the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, which attempts to protect women from domestic violence, stalking, and date rape. She believes businesses have a right to refuse service to gay couples. She also believes that they should not have a right to marry. These are not my Tennessee values. Fascinating. Fascinating. Now, not only that, but of course, you have her being in favor of Democratic Representative Jim Cooper, as well as Marsha Blackburn's opponent in the race. All right, so that's interesting. So we're finding ourselves in this weird time, this very strange and wondrous time, where Kanye is a Trumper and Taylor Swift is apparently anti-Trump, or at least anti-Republican. Crazy. This is, again, complete insanity. But then again, who isn't surprised? Back when Kanye and Swift were having their beef, I guess it makes sense. Who knew? But anyway, enough on that. So now she comes out in favor to Democrats. So what do conservatives? How do they feel about this? Well, this is interesting. Now, Dan Gaynor, writing for Fox News, wrote that, quote, Swift's open liberalism was clearly designed as a change in the narrative after Hollywood left lost the Supreme Court fight over Brett Kavanaugh. So Fox News immediately going into conspiracy mode, that it's just distraction from the Supreme Court fight from Kavanaugh. But the Democrats, by the way, one of them actually voted in favor of Kavanaugh. That was Joe Manchin. And Joe Manchin is a Republican piece of shit, even though he pretends to be a Democrat some of the time. But never when it counts. So that's fun. Tommy Learn, our favorite bobble-headed blonde. Not to say that all blondes are bobble-headed. It's just that she is. She also chimed in. She said, let's be clear, I'm not with Taylor and I'm not with Kanye. I'm not for celebrities that pop off shit they don't understand, period. Right. Speaking of popping, hey, Tommy, do you remember those tweets when, before you became internet famous for spouting conservative propaganda about popping that pee? I mean, you're going to talk about popping, right? Popping off? Well, you were popping something. Just saying. Okay, let's go from Lauren to Mike Huckabee. No, this should be fun. Mike Huckabee says, so Taylor Swift has every right to be political, but it won't impact election unless we allow 13-year-old girls to vote. Still with hashtag Marsha Blackburn. Oh, see, I'm clever. Look at that. Well, you know what's funny about that? So in her post, she said, hey, you know what would be a great thing to do if people were to vote? So go register to vote in Tennessee. So, and this is one of the last days in a lot of states to register to vote for the upcoming primary. Or I'm sorry, not primary, but general election. So Mike Huckabee jokes about the 13-year-olds, right? But in reality, in the real world where the rest of us live, after that Instagram post, Vote.org saw a massive spike in voter registration. About 65,000 people registered to vote in a 24-hour period. Apparently, she doesn't have an army of 13-year-olds. She also has an army of registered voters. The Taylor bump could be real. Oh, no. Now, going back to more conservative outrage, I love this. Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA, went on Fox and Friends to basically lament how, oh, I can't believe the left has gotten to Taylor. My Tay, what have you done? Et tu, Brute? Oh, that was terrible. Continuing on, he said, what I used to love about Taylor Swift is that she stayed away from politics. Hilarious. Now, the biggest meltdown, however, is happening over on 4chan and some of the racist The Donald threads. The Daily Beast first reported a while back that members of the alt-right believed that Taylor Swift was secretly one of them, that she had white supremacist views. There was no basis of truth on that. They were speculating, and some of them considered her the Aryan goddess. Wow. Fast forward to today, or you should say a couple days ago. Oops. Not so much apparently one of them anymore. In fact, over at 4chan, the hate is palpable. Here's one example. Her career is over now, one 4chan user wrote. She'll now be used as an example of how bad it is for you to abandon your race. That says all you really need to know. And of course, speaking of white supremacists, the president also weighed in. In comments to reporters Monday afternoon, he basically said, oh, she doesn't know enough about politics to join the conversation. Of course, every time somebody comes out on the left, that comes out with a sort of leftist opinion, or at least a liberal opinion, every conservative's like, she didn't know anything. She needs to shut up, stay in her lane. That, were you telling Kanye? Because Kanye knows absolutely nothing. Kanye is an idiot. And yet they're like, oh, Kanye, come here. I love you, Kanye. MAGA. Oh, MAGA loves you. You know what Kanye is actually interested in? Money. So Kanye knows that, and despite being an idiot, he knows that the Trump fan base is one of the most easily manipulated fan bases in the world. Again, they support Donald Trump. They believe everything he says. Kanye is broke. He wants to make money. So he's now sidling up to the president like, hey, MAGA, I'm your guy. Totally. At least that's what I think is happening. But that's just me. Now, back to Trump. Trump basically said, and this is according to a tweet from Rebecca Ballhaus, as a reporter, Trump on Taylor Swift endorsing Marsha Blackburn opponent, Phil Bredesen. Quote, I'm sure Taylor Swift doesn't know anything about her. Let's say that I like Taylor Swift's music about 25% less now. Okay? Awesome. I mean, I like her 25% less now. I don't know, man. This is fun. Watching the right melt down over Taylor Swift is probably one of the best things that I'll see today. And in reality, that is sort of kind of depressing. Moving on. That's a little longer than I thought it would. But let's go into something serious now. So what do the American people feel about Judge Brett Kavanaugh now that he's been seated on the Supreme Court? Now, a lot of conservatives will tell you, oh no, he's incredibly popular. Everybody wanted on the Supreme Court. We got a massive victory for the American people in Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Thank God, hashtag MAGA. Well, what's the reality? Well, it turns out Brett Kavanaugh is a sharply divisive and actually very unpopular Supreme Court justice. In fact, he's one of the most unpopular nominees in American history. In fact, back in August, before he was seated on the court, and this is before all the sexual assault allegations had come out, you had 40% of Americans opposing his nomination, whereas only 37% supported it. Now, that is likely, at that time, before all these allegations came out, probably because he was a Trump nominee, and because a lot of people still remember what they did to Merrick Garland. Again, I wasn't in favor of Merrick Garland. I thought he was, pro-corporate, status quo, etc., money in politics. But Kavanaugh is even more pro-corporate. In fact, 87% of his decisions were in favor of big business. So, okay, that explains that. However, following the sexual assault allegations from Christine Blasey Ford, which the nation watched her recount her story, and they believe she is actually very, very credible, and they were very credible allegations, his popularity has dropped like a rock. Now, by the time the Senate confirmed Kavanaugh to the court last weekend, a majority of Americans wanted his nomination rejected. Now, earlier in the summer, I should say, he had gained some support for a short time. 41% of the public backed his confirmation. However, while Kavanaugh gained ground with the Republican base, he lost it with the broader public, as 51% of the voters say the Senate should have rejected his Supreme Court bid. What's more, a majority of voters also say they believe the women who accused Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct were telling the truth, and that Kavanaugh lied about his alcohol use before the Senate, and that his professional qualifications do not outweigh any questions about his personal conduct. So there's a lot there. But basically, you still have a majority of Americans that are not in favor of Kavanaugh being placed on the Supreme Court. So they looked at both the sexual assault allegations, the fact that he lied about his alcohol use, and then, of course, about the way that he conducted himself during that hearing, basically screaming, crying, carrying on. And they're like, no, even if those allegations are false, you do not have the temperament to be a Supreme Court justice. And add in the fact that you are nakedly partisan, as he had alluded to, saying that, oh no, all this is a Hillary witch hunt. It's a Clinton witch hunt. What's funny that you talk about that, because Kavanaugh was also, back during the impeachment of Bill Clinton, an attack dog who was deeply partisan. Just saying. Remember, that was the whole thing where first it started out as an investigation into properties, the Whitewater, which, by the way, they didn't find that Bill Clinton had done anything wrong, and immediately went into sexual assault allegations. That's what you actually call a witch hunt. Now, when it came to Kavanaugh, these allegations, look, when they, came forward, Blasey Ford eventually came forward after her letter was leaked. She's like, yes, this did happen to me. I didn't want to come forward at first, but then he's going to become a Supreme Court justice. And so I felt like I had to say something. And look, once she had come out with her allegations, the floodgate opened. Now, did the FBI look into that? No. There was an investigation, and it was extremely limited in scope. There were about 40 people who were willing to come forward and corroborate the claims made by Julie Swetnick, which is the third accuser, Deborah Ramirez, which is the second accuser. So there were a lot of people willing to come forward, and guess what? The FBI didn't talk to them, didn't even interview Kavanaugh or Blasey Ford, and barely interviewed Ramirez. This was a sham investigation that was going to come out with basically this outcome where, oh no, we didn't find that he did anything wrong, so we can immediately place him on the court. Well, these polls show that the American people are not on board with this. And if they're not on board now, just wait till he starts making terrible pro-corporate anti-choice decisions, which is definitely going to happen. And this is the reason that conservatives wanted him on that court. Not only to protect corporations, to protect their donors, but also when the time comes, protect Donald Trump. As they had said before, I don't believe that, and this is Kavanaugh, I don't believe that presidents should be impeached. I don't believe that presidents should get in trouble while they're president. We shouldn't bother them while they're doing the work of the country. Again, a really strange position for somebody who had once went after and tried and went along with the impeachment of Bill Clinton. So, yeah, I'm with the rest of the American people, the majority. Unfortunately, a majority of Republicans, they don't care. And Republican politicians are like, yeah. So what if a majority of the American people don't want this nomination? Our base does. Our base is vicious, and we're just as vicious as they are. We have the levers of power, and goddamn it, we're going to use it, and we're going to steamroll over everyone that gets in our way. That is our governing philosophy. Don't like it? Sad. Well, you know what I say? Since I don't like it, we should beat them at the ballot box. There are elections that are coming up, midterm elections. Maybe we should show them how much we dislike what they do when they're in power. Vote. Okay. So, that said, I'm going to take a quick break. We'll come back. I'm going to come after the Democrats now. That's always a fun time in the show. So, stay right here. Around the Nation. We'll be back. If you have any super chats, I will read them when we come back. So, stay right here. Around the Nation. Everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, Jeff Waldorf. Okay, got a super chat from Jonathan Scott, who asks, I'm curious if you've read The Anatomy of Fascism by Robert Paxton. Just finished it, and it really puts stuff into perspective as of late. I have not read that, but something tells me that I definitely should. So that's an excellent suggestion, and I will look into it. And thank you for the super chat, by the way. Okay. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. Sharing is caring. Whether you're on Facebook or on YouTube, please share, share, and share. Okay. Let's get back into the stories here. Let's go to the Democrats. Whoops. That's never good. All right. In the lead up to the midterms, the banks now have a new target for a lot of their campaign spending. This time, it's on so-called moderate Democrats. Now, why is that? Well, apparently earlier on, and I've reported on this, these Senate Democrats backed the first easing of financial rules since the 2008 financial crisis. And now, these same Democrats are getting a lot of money in return. Reuters is reporting that commercial banks have so far donated a total of $2.5 million to Senate Democrats in the 2018 election cycle. That is the largest sum that they have donated to Democrats since 2008, according to the Center for Responsive Politics. Now, of the 20 Senate candidates receiving the most money from these banks during the 2018 cycle, 15 of them are Democrats. So that is a majority of Democrats. So now the banks are saying, hey, we're going to start funneling money at you. Oh, that's interesting. Now, who are they? Well, some of them are not going to be a surprise. Senators Heidi Heitkamp, John Tester, and Joe Donnelly. So the same Democrats who helped push through the May legislation are now the top 3 recipients of donations from these big banks, according to that data. Lovely. Now, the other 12 Senate Democrats are also considered moderates, which is basically another word for I take money from big corporations. And I do the corporation's bidding. Now, these Democrats fight every effort to constrain the banks and prevent them from crashing the economy just like they did in 2008. So the incredibly weak Dodd-Frank legislation, that is what these corporate Democrats are basically chipping away at. Now, not only that, but these same Democrats have been, going against the tone that progressives have been taking. And look, they're not happy, right? How dare you attack my banker buddies? No, they're not terrible people. We're on the cocktail circuit all the time. My banker friends are nice. They give me money in my campaigns. Now, people like Elizabeth Warren, for example, and Bernie Sanders speak out against the bankers and their largesse. In fact, Bernie Sanders just released a bill that would break up the big banks. And so here are these banks going, oh shit, we need to stop what's going on in the Democratic Party. We need to strengthen the corporate Democrats, the weak Democrats that take our money and help us with the help of Republicans, with the wholly bought off Republican Party, to loosen regulations on us. In fact, according to Reuters, the sector hopes that boosting moderates will constrain the big bank bashing wing of the Democratic Party, including Senator Elizabeth Warren, a likely presidential candidate in 2020, and Representative Maxine Waters, who is poised to chair the committee overseeing banks if Democrats win the House. So, look, no mention of Bernie Sanders, of course, but Sanders is on their mind. And not to say that Elizabeth Warren has been a slouch when it comes to banking regulation. She definitely is. Effective. Now, and she definitely scares the banks. Now, here's some more context, right, into the spending. So this marks an interesting trend. This is the first time since 2012 that the banking industry has actually given more to Senate Democrats than they have to Republicans. According to the Center's data, which is based on federal records released later last month. Now, the sector ended up spending about $2.5 million to Senate Democrats and $1.8 million to Republicans this election cycle. By contrast, the industry gave $1.6 million to Democrats and $5.2 million to Republicans during the 2016 elections. So, now, you know why they're giving so much to the Democrats now? Well, it's because there's a chance the Democrats might win back the House and narrow the Republican majority in the Senate. And the reason that I say that is because in the Senate, you've got a lot of Democrats that are defending their seats. People like Joe Manchin, people like John Tester, Heidi Heitkamp, etc., Joe Donnelly. These are the corporate Democrats, and they do not want these Democrats to lose their seats. Now you might say, well, wait a minute. We give money to Republicans, so wouldn't it be more beneficial if there's a Republican in our seat? Well, that's interesting. The reason that I think, and they talk about this a lot, is, well, we want things to be bipartisan. So that way, you know, look, if Republicans go and deregulate the banks on their own, people aren't going to like that. They're going to look at that and go, oh, here we go. Republicans, party of the rich, party of the bankers. We're going to support progressive Democrats instead, in order to take on these Republicans. But if they give money to these corporate Democrats and they manage to keep their seat, and then they do bipartisan deals with the Republicans, look at me, I'm reaching across the aisle, we're getting stuff done. That invokes a more positive image. And at the end of the day, the banks still get their money. They still end up getting deregulated. So that's the whole thing, right? So they're getting involved because they feel that they need to protect these so-called moderate Democrats. Now, the reason that they're so threatened is because here you have progressive Democrats that are running primaries, a lot of them that have actually won primaries, and that are starting to climb up the ranks in the Democratic Party. So the banks look at this and say, well, all our allies are gone. And if we don't fund these moderate Democrats, if we don't protect them against the Republicans, then the voting public is going to lose confidence in these so-called moderates, right? They're going to lose confidence in bipartisanship, and they're going to start to gravitate towards more progressive Democrats that are anti-bank. Because remember, most of the public hates the banks. Most of the public is still angry about the bank bailouts from 2008. In fact, you have a poll here from the Harris. It's a Harris poll on behalf of Better Markets. They said that 2/3 of registered voters are more likely to vote for a candidate who supports regulating Wall Streets and big banks when they talk about the economy. So the people don't like the banks. And the banks are like, oh, shit. Well, we need to fund corporate Democrats. And then, of course, you fund a corporate Democrat and you pit them against a Republican. Then you offer this explanation to regular people like, hey, who are we going to vote for? The Republican or the Democrat that sometimes votes in favor of us? Well, either way, the banks end up winning this game. That's what's going on here. Look, they don't care. The banks don't care if Republicans lose against moderate Democrats because on finance, they're the same. They serve the same donors. This is simply a way to stymie a progressive insurgency inside the Democratic Party. And of course, not only that, but by funding these corporate Democrats, they're also paying them back for the earlier deregulation that they did and to make sure that they won't be swayed by the Elizabeth Warrens of the party. In fact, the American Bankers Association, the top Washington bank lobby group, had contributed about $83,000 to Senate Democratic candidates this cycle and is leading the industry's push to regain bipartisan support, according to its CEO, Rob Nichols. Now, Nichols, I love the Orwellian name here. Oh, no, we're just here for bipartisan support, which just basically means we will rob you with both hands. Nichols, whose association has for the first time bought advertisements for 12 midterm candidates, including 4 Democrats, called enhancing the industry's political capability, quote, strategically important. Quote, this is rigorously bipartisan. If you support us, we want to support you. This is not about playing party favorites. For decades, banking policy was bipartisan up until Dodd-Frank. And we were excited to see a return to this bipartisanship. Now, look, before, of course, money in politics, yes, the Republican Party was definitely more pro-bank and pro-banker, but even they had limits, right? Before Ronald Reagan and before, Nixon and all that, they at least were like, okay, we need regulation because the 1929 stock crash and depression that followed was horrible for everyone. Everyone. We don't want to go back to that. But since money entered into politics, and since these banks and other big corporations can start donating to our politicians, we have been on a consistent boom-bust cycle with the economy, with the banks continuing to crash the economy because they take more and more risks. And they're basically making money, off speculating on money, instead of doing what a bank is traditionally supposed to do. So, now, furthermore, according to the article, industry officials are now hoping the senators they support, and this is where some of that money comes into play too, will back further legislation easing capital market rules drawn up in a package that passed the House in July, but is yet to pass the Senate. That's what they want, more deregulation. He added that the industry is also anxious to ensure these new senators are around to oversee a swift implementation of May's new laws by banking regulators. That's what it's all about, folks. It's about the banks winning no matter who is in charge. They fund both sides so they can rob you with both hands. That's what this is about. You've got to get the money out of politics, man. Wow. Now, one more here. And this is a fun quote. Ken Benston, the chief executive of Bank Lobbyist Group, the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association, and former Texas congressman, said that it was, quote, unfortunate that the industry continued, in his view, to be seen as, quote, a political piñata. Oh, you sad little bankers. Are you mad that people, rightfully so, blame you for what happened in 2008 and the subsequent bailout? Remember, you got bailed out by the taxpayers, but the people whose homes are underwater now, they didn't get bailed out. Regular people didn't get bailed out when they lost their jobs, but you did. You got bailed out, and you got a golden parachute. Now, I'm with Bernie Sanders on this one. We're going to have to break up the big banks, not deregulate them. However, this should disturb you. He said that the Democratic views in the banking industry are not monolithic, and he sees opportunities to work with members of the party. So Heitkamp, Tester, Donnelly, Brown, and a bunch of other congressmen, 15 so-called moderates, are pro-big bank. If you didn't know what I was going to say already, I'm just going to say it. Break up the banks and get the money out of politics. And I'm going to add one more thing in there. Primaries. Right? You get rid of these corporate Democrats, and primary season has passed, I know. But there's always next time. But we've got to get rid of these guys, or else they're going to continue to vote in favor of so-called bipartisan bills that are basically gifts for the big banks. That's what this is about. Don't be fooled. All right. I believe I forgot something. Yes, I forgot to do something. So, all right. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take a quick break. We'll come back with the next story. I gotta set up a chart that I want you guys to see. So you'll probably see it during the break because just the way the technology is structured. But we'll be right back. So stay here, Around the Nation. Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, Jeff Waldorf. Okay. So, super chats, nope. Let's move on to the stories because we're running low on time. Okay. All right. Students are now having to go to extraordinary new lengths to afford their college textbooks, according to a new survey. Now, this survey was done by Morning Consult on behalf of Cengage, which is an online textbook company. Now, the results of this are very discouraging, especially if you are in college yourself, which you already know the pain of buying books, or if you are sending, for example, your kid to college. Now, it turns out that 71% of college students, because of the cost of textbooks themselves, had to ask their parents for money. Like, hey, my book is over $300. I need your help. Not only that, it gets worse. 41% apparently had to skip meals in order to save up money for textbooks. That's not including tuition, but just the textbooks themselves. Wow. And of course, 31%, nearly a third, had to take fewer classes so they could afford their reading material. Now, wow. Now, of course, the question is fairly obvious, and so is the answer. But why? Well, just like the cost of college, the cost of textbooks has risen dramatically since the 1970s. For example, I got a chart for you guys that I want to go over. Here we go. And this is from just January of 1998 to July of 2018. The cost of textbooks has risen 191%. Now, since 1978, the cost of textbooks has actually risen over 1,000%. Look, these are the costs that are borne by younger people in college. So if you're wondering why, oh, these lazy millennials are they're still staying at home, they're sleeping on their parents' couch, and they're not doing anything, and they're spending all their money on lattes and avocado toast. No, that's not true. They are literally skipping meals in order to pay for their textbooks, or taking out enormous loans, which of course they'll have to pay back later with interest. That will probably take them the rest of their lives to pay off. This is what we're doing to our young people. This is what we're doing to the youngest generation. We are saddling up with them with so much debt that they'll never have a chance to pay it off. Combine that with stagnant wages that we have seen since at least the Reagan administration. The lack of union rights, the lack of competitive pay, the lack of good paying jobs. There are plenty of jobs out there, but are they good paying jobs? And most likely, no. Not compared to how much it costs, especially in larger cities like LA, San Francisco, New York, and Seattle. Even a living wage there, $15 an hour, is actually not a living wage. And you wonder why millennials have an incredibly hard time and why millennials are deeply, deeply cynical. Not only that, but the vast majority of current and former college students say that their textbooks are overpriced. And 85% said buying their books is somewhat financially stressful. I would say that probably 100% should say that they're absolutely financially stressful. Now, of the 1,651 current and former students surveyed, a majority also told Morning Consult that they didn't buy what was required, purchased outdated copies, or shared with classmates. So that's what they've had to do. So you understand, millennials growing up in the economy post-2008, the financial crisis, we've had to get smart. We've had to get savvy. There's always these questions, why aren't millennials buying diamonds? Why are they going to Applebee's? It's because we grew up having less opportunity than our parents. We're not doing what our parents' generation was able to do. We're not raising families. We're not buying new cars. We're not buying new houses. Most of us can't afford to do so. And a lot of us look at that and say, what's the point? That's why you see Uber, ride sharing. That's why you see places like, I forget, B&B, right? I think I got that wrong. But so it's places where you can, basically rent out a room so that people can stay. And, you end up getting money for it. So I don't know why, but I can't remember the name. But that's why you have this sharing economy. It's not because millennials are so different and they want to do this stuff. It's because we have to. It's because we grew up in an economic mess that we did not create. And you want to know the reason that college tuition has increased? It's because the states stopped paying for it. The states and the federal government have pulled back so much money out of higher education. They do not consider it a priority anymore to fund these public colleges and universities. And so all that cost has come on to us. And you can see the result of that in this study. And of course, as I said before, millennials are savvy now. There's all these places that let you rent textbooks and do that. But it's still, combined with the high cost of college, it's making it so that there's a generation of people that just can't afford to be educated anymore. And that's what's going on here. Is there any wonder why students have skipped meals? As I said before, the cost of undergrad education is now 12 times higher than it was 40 years ago. That outpaces inflation, while the index price of college tuition and fees went up by more than 1,122% since 1978. That's why they're skipping meals. It's not avocado toast that's bankrupting kids. It's the incredibly high price of basically everything. So there's your lesson. Okay. All right. Moving on to absolute nightmarish disaster. The clock is ticking on climate change, and we are almost out of time. According to a new report released on Sunday, we have just 12 years to make massive change to global energy infrastructure in order to prevent the worst of climate change. The worst. In fact, according to this is a report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, who released a 700-page report on Sunday. They said, quote, "There is no documented historical precedent for the action needed at this moment." So this, they're not pulling any punches in this report, and reading it is just, it is disastrous. Now the report makes clear that the warming world will be worse for people, humankind, in the forms of famine, disease, economic tolls, and of course refugee crisis. Now, it also makes clear that there is a big difference between the devastation from 1.5 degrees Celsius, what's considered the moderate level of average warming, and 2 degrees Celsius, in which we are barreling towards. Now, Valerie Masson-Delmotte, co-chair of the IPCC Working Group 1, at a press conference said, quote, "It's very clear that a half a degree matters." Now, the reason I talk about half a degree is because, look, that's where we're trying to get to. We're trying to prevent it from going over 2 degrees Celsius. It hasn't hit 1.5 yet. And 1.5 is going to be bad enough. So this is what we were supposed to hit if we stayed as part of the Paris Climate Agreement. Now, under that agreement, nations set a goal of limiting to about 2 degrees increase in global average temperatures, with ambitions of a stricter limit of 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. Now, the UN asked the IPCC to figure out what it would take to hit the 1.5 degree target and what's in store for the world if we did end up doing that. Remember, that is the best case scenario, and we are nowhere near it. Now, the team pooled more than 6,000 scientific publications, drew contributions from 132 authors, and had more than 1,000 scientists review the findings. Now, this report, again, this is absolutely disastrous. They said that staying at or below 1.5 degrees Celsius requires slashing global greenhouse emissions 45% below 2010 levels by 2030 and reaching net zero by 2050. Now, in practical terms, that means reducing our coal consumption by at least a third, and it demands a vast scale-up of emerging technologies, such as those that remove carbon dioxide directly from the air, all in the window of the next 12 years. So not only do we have to cut coal consumption by a third worldwide, but also have to suck all the carbon out of the air if we're going to hit 1.5 degrees Celsius. Wow. Not only that, but the report says devastation is coming. And they say that the additional sea level rise of going from 1.5 degrees Celsius to 2 degrees would put 10 million people at risk of flooding. So, wow. And that's property damage from flooding. Now, another finding of this report says that for every fraction of a degree that we can take off the thermostat will pay dividends across the economy. In short, they say things will get worse And look, we can avoid some of the worst case scenarios. However, at this point in time, the easiest options are off the table. We are now in, we need a fucking Hail Mary and we need it now. So to summarize, there is no way that we can hit the target without actually removing carbon from the air. We've already put too much in there. We've got to suck some of it out. And that cutting greenhouse gas emissions sharply enough to meet the ambitious climate mitigation goal will require a massive global shift in energy use. Now, Jim Skea, co-chair of the IPCC Working Group 3, also said, quote, "We have not identified any pathways that get to 1.5 degrees Celsius without carbon dioxide removal. We have to do it now. We don't have a choice. We're not going to hit it unless we do." Now, carbon dioxide removal, they explain, can take the form of direct air capture, where machines can scrub carbon dioxide from the air. It can also come from using bioenergy with carbon capture and sequestration, where plants pull carbon dioxide from the air and scrubbers prevent the carbon from the resulting biofuels from reaching the sky. Land use, from how we graze cattle to how we plant forests, is also a critical tactic for removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. In the worst case scenario, we may have to draw down upwards of 1,000 gigatons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere by the year 2100. Now, what happens if we don't? Well, I alluded to it earlier, where there's going to be a lot of costs if we don't do this. Well, let me kind of go into the details of what that means. Basically, we would have extreme heat and storms, as well as related outcomes like disease and poverty that are projected to rise with temperatures. Climate-related risks to health, livelihoods, food security, water supply, human security, and economic growth are projected to increase with global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius and increase further with 2 degrees Celsius, according to the report. So, rising oceans, places that no longer can support life, which means mass migration. You think we have an immigration problem now? No. Imagine when we start having climate refugees, which is going to be even worse, because look, a lot of these people will no longer be able to grow food. It'll be just simply too hot, the water will evaporate. And coastal flooding, Florida is going to be underwater by 2100 if we don't do anything. And actually, probably even if we do something, Florida, gone. There goes the coastline. It's going to be a disaster. Now, if we are able to draw down some of this climate change, there are some positive results. Some of them include improved air quality, resulting from projected reductions in non-CO2 emissions, would provide direct and immediate population health benefits in all 1.5 degree Celsius model pathways, according to the authors. Now, that, of course, is very detailed, a lot of scientific jargon in there, but basically it's saying we need to do something quick, which is what I've been saying all along. Now, the question is, will the media talk about this? Will other outlets cover this vigorously? I don't think so. I don't think MSNBC is going to talk about it all that much. I don't think CNN is going to talk about it. Definitely not Fox News. But this is a disastrous study. This is a disastrous path that we are heading on in the United States. And not just in the United States, but the world. We are not anywhere close to hitting 1.5 degrees Celsius. We are heading towards 2. We are heading and beyond. This is a global disaster, catastrophe waiting to happen. And unfortunately, like with all things that are super important, are going to get drowned out by ridiculous crap. And that is what's happening today. And so I don't have any faith in the media. which sucks because we need to do something. We need to do something now. The easy options are off the table. We need massive investment in clean energy. We need a Marshall Plan for our energy grid so that we can have a green economy. It is a Green New Deal is what we need. And until people who actually give a shit about the environment get into power, we are sadly not going to have that. Okay. One more story for you guys. All right. You've all heard of walking while black, driving while black, hell, even grilling while black. Well, now we should add moving into your house while black to the list of offenses that apparently you can get handcuffed for. Now, this story comes from the Kansas City Star, and they reported that last week that a man, 61-year-old man, named Carl Robinson, was considered to be suspicious because he was moving a TV into his new house. Well, what's so suspicious about that? Well, I don't know. Maybe we should ask the officer. This happened in Tonganoxie, Kansas, and the officer was. Let me see if I have the name of this. I don't know if I do. But anyway, so this officer basically thought, oh, this black guy, he's moving the TV into his house. Well, he must be robbing this house. I'm going to go check. I'm going to see what happens. Now, Robinson told the Star that although he understood why he may have been stopped by the officer initially, given how late he was finishing up his move, he said it's hard to forgive the officer for what he did next. Now, let me stop there for a second. So, okay, look, this officer sees a guy moving stuff into his house, like a television, maybe a big screen, right? And goes, well, it's kind of late to be moving. Maybe I should check it out. Maybe I should see if this guy is doing something wrong or not. Now, that's funny because when I moved in my current place, we basically didn't get done moving until 3 o'clock in the morning. So we were moving shit way well into the night. Nobody stopped us. Nobody talked to us. No police officer. And I know this is anecdotal, but that doesn't seem to happen to people who look like me. It's because it doesn't happen to people who look like me. Now, let me get to what happened next. Now, Robinson had offered to get the documentation in his home, confirming that he owned the home. He's like, hey, man, this is my house. I've got the documents. I can prove it. The officer, instead of letting him go and getting that documentation to prove that, yes, this is my house, I'm moving into my house, the officer instead put him in handcuffs. But he said, I've got the documents. They're right inside. I have them. I can prove it to you. I'm not stealing. This is my house. This is my TV. This is my stuff. No. We don't believe you. And just to make sure, because, we think you might be dangerous, I'm going to put you in handcuffs. Now, afterwards, of course, he ended up calling for backup as well, and additional officers later entered the man's home and searched for the paperwork themselves. They ended up finding it, and then later on, they, of course, said, oh, our bad, sorry about that. Now, Robinson told the local newspaper after this all had went down, he said, quote, if I'd been a white man, that wouldn't happen. I'm being handcuffed right here in my own damn property. Well, that continues to happen. The people who say that, oh no, you don't understand, racism, it doesn't exist anymore. What are you talking about? Are you just race baiting? Well, you're not somebody who apparently can get handcuffed in their own home. And this comes not long after a police officer went into the wrong house and shot and killed a black man who was living there. You wonder why the black community doesn't trust police officers. Now, in footage captured by the initial officer who confronted him through his camera, Robinson basically was asking, hey, is this necessary? No, it's not necessary. But this is what we do to black men in America. The police officers thought, oh no, it's absolutely necessary. Now look, this next thing that I'm going to tell you though, might, and I know I've been super, super tough on the cop, and he deserves to meet, you know, like to have someone be really tough on him. But the next part kind of makes you understand a little bit what, why he was stopped. Now, police apologized to Robinson once they'd received his papers from his home, proving ownership, and explained to him why he was cuffed, citing recent robberies in the same town. Robinson said in response to this, quote, "It's real uncomfortable, but I understand." So now here's the guy who's been handcuffed in his own house, moving into his own house, basically saying, I don't like this, but I get it. I understand there's been some robberies, and I get it. If you look like me, you're a white guy, would you be as understanding as Mr. Robinson? Would you be like, oh no, I get it. There's been a couple of robberies, and you just wanted to make sure. Would you be like that? Again, this shows what black people have to go through in America. And now, of course, there's another update to this. Days after the incident, Robinson then filed a complaint with the police department. He said, he told the Star, quote, "For black men, he thinks you're guilty until proven innocent. They're thinking I'm stealing. I've been hearing this for 40 years, getting pulled over, being searched. I'm not going to let this go." And you know what? He shouldn't. He shouldn't let this go. This is obvious racial profiling. Even though the officer, I don't think the officer is a secret Klansman, right? That he's got a KKK hood hidden in his, trunk. No, I don't think that. I think this is where racial biases come into play. And everybody has these internal biases that they don't quite understand that they have, right? So that it's that inherent bias that I've talked about before. Oh, we've had some robberies. We see this guy moving in late at night, and we just got to check it out. But they don't realize that they are perpetuating a racist system, and that they are indeed doing an injustice to the people that they're supposed to protect. So I do hope that there is, I don't even know what he's looking for, what Mr. Robinson is looking for. But I think, and I hope that the Tonganoxie Police Department and others start to understand, like, hey, maybe we should be a little bit more conscious of how we treat African American members of the community. That we shouldn't just assume that people are guilty. You're conservatives talking about due process all the time. Well, where's this guy's due process? He didn't have any. And that is one of the big problems in America facing black people today. And it's a problem we need to fix. Okay. That does it. Thank you for joining me, going around the nation with me today. If you can, please give us a like and a share. I do want to check our, well, we got a couple of super chats here actually as well. Marco T says, quote, "Space Force evacuations on the way." Assuming that has to do with the climate change story. No, there will be no Space Force. Space Force. They will not evacuate us. They will evacuate Trump, but not us. Sad. And Edward Norton says Tamir Rice deserves his justice. Absolutely. That's a story that I haven't gotten to either, is that Tamir Rice, the officer who shot and killed Tamir Rice, who was fired by the department, has been hired in by another police department. That is insanity. Absolute insanity. What are we doing in this country? Again, if you say, oh no, racism doesn't exist, racism is dead, you are clearly incredibly privileged and are either blind to what's going on, or you don't consider what is happening to black people racist and a problem. So, and that in itself is deeply problematic. All right. So thank you for the super chats. Thank you for supporting the show. That does go to help support the show, keep us on the air. Another way to do so is to become a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. We really need to get to 500 patrons to make us sustainable and allow me to continue the show. So if we can get to 500 patrons, that'd be great. We are also currently at 89,738 subscribers. So please subscribe if you haven't already. Get your friends, get your family to subscribe as well. So, all right, guys, that's it. Thank you. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.